Florida State and Florida are struggling right now. They are down bad, and a lot of people from a national standpoint have a hard time understanding why FSU football and the Florida Gators football programs are struggling despite having access to all this great talent in the state of Florida when it comes to recruiting. And here's the thing. When you are as bad as what Florida State and Florida have been over these last couple of years, it's hard to keep these in-state recruits from going out of the state and playing for schools like Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State, who have shown the ability to get these guys to the NFL and to be able to give them a national championship. FSU and Florida haven't been national championship contenders in over a decade, which is why they're having a hard time keeping the best players in this state. It's the same problem that USC has had. You know, with how bad USC has been prior to the rival Lincoln Riley, some of their best California talent has went to other schools like Bryce Young. Instead of going to USC, despite being at Mater Dei has always been a pipeline for USC, he went to Alabama. The reasoning for that is because there's no reason for him to want to stay in the same state with how bad that biggest program has been. And when you look at FSU and Florida, both of them are struggling for two different reasons. Florida State is struggling because, for one, they're not recruiting the state as good as what they need to be. Under Mike Norvell, they're recruiting decent, but they're not recruiting as good as what they were in the prime days of the Jimbo Fisher era. As bad as how things ended for Jimbo Fisher down there in Tallahassee, his recruiting classes were mostly inside the top 5, top 10 the majority of years. Under Mike Norvell, it seems like you're consistently finishing outside the top 10 in recruiting. And the problem with Florida State this season is that they've overly relied on the transfer portal instead of consistently recruiting at a high enough level to be able to not have to lean on the portal. The portal is only an asset that you use when you got a few positions that you need to address. Let's say that you got a hole at right tackle and a hole at corner. You can go into the transfer portal and get a couple of guys to fill those needs. It's not one of those things that you just solely rely upon to completely build a team. Now, with how bad Florida State has been this year, it's going to take them at least 2 years to rebuild to get back to the level that they were last season when they won the ACC championship and they went undefeated in the regular season. Because this season sets you back. With all these transfer portal guys, they got to leave, and now you got to re-step up your recruiting efforts, and then you got to develop those guys, wait for them to get into their sophomore, junior years to actually be able to make a run again, because you're not good at developing in-house talent, which is why you got to lean on the portal. That's why things have gone so awry for Florida State. That's why they got no culture. That's why they're missing so many tackles on defense. That's why they're not physical. They lack soul. They lack toughness. Because when you got players that don't have no skin in the game, that only view you as an opportunity versus viewing you as a program that they want to make better, when you got Jordan Travis, even though you got him from the transfer portal, he wasn't just a one-and-done guy. He was a guy who came in, you developed him for 3 to 4 years, and he became a great quarterback for you. And during that time, he developed such a love and admiration for Florida State to the point where he gave his all to make this program better. With all these transfers you have in, they don't have that same admiration for your program. They view you as a stepping stone to get to the next level. They're not willing to sacrifice what it takes to make Florida State great again. That's why you had all those opt-outs in the bowl game against Georgia when you got blown out. When Alabama missed the playoffs, when they lost 2 games, and they had Bryce Young and Will Anderson, those guys played. You want to know why? Because they didn't want to leave Alabama without going out on top, regardless if it was in the playoffs or in the bowl game. And Alabama has never had any of their big-time players ever opt out of the bowl game. I remember when they blew out Michigan a few years ago in the bowl game. And it wasn't even like a big-time bowl game. I believe it was like the Outback Bowl or the Citrus Bowl or something like that. And they had Jerry Jeudy, Najee Harris, all those boys were playing because they loved Nick Saban and they loved Alabama football. All those dudes they recruited, they didn't get out of the transfer portal. And the problem with Florida State is that their culture is so messed up right now due to leaning on the transfer portal too much, not recruiting at the level that they should be. Florida State should always be having a top 10 recruiting class year after year. Florida State is a prestigious program. Even though I'm a Miami fan, I can admit that FSU is a program that is rooted in tradition. Their history goes far back since before I even came out the womb. And yet people don't look at Florida State the same way that they used to. Now, when you look at Florida, on the other hand, Florida just has completely bad coaching. Billy Napier belongs in the Sun Belt. He's not a head coach who's built to be coaching at a P4 program, especially at the toughest conference in college football, which is the SEC. And Florida also hasn't recruited as well as what they should. Like FSU, they've recruited on the outside looking in of the top 10. Because it's hard to incentivize people to want to play for a program that hasn't really made any progress. I get that progress isn't always linear, but at least Mike Norvell, his first 3 seasons at FSU, they improved every single season record-wise prior to this year. Well, Florida, They made it to a bowl game year 1 under Billy Napier, and ever since it's been downhill. With how bad Billy Napier has been at being able to get the most out of his talent, being able to develop his guys, there's no reason for recruits to want to play for Florida. Florida football hasn't been what it used to be when you think of the glory days of Tim Tebow and Urban Meyer. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I saw Colin Cowherd make a tweet where he doesn't understand why FSU and Florida are so bad despite having so much access to the in-state talent that resides in Florida when it comes to recruiting. And I would tell you, Colin, it's the same reason why a lot of the top players out of California have left to go play for other schools in the South instead of playing for USC. Because when a program like USC that used to be dominant isn't dominant anymore and they fall off, it's hard to retain some of the best players inside that state. A lot of those Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama teams that have won national championships, they've done it with a good amount of players from the state of Florida. Imagine if Jerry Jeudy would have came to Miami. Think about all of the great talent that has left the South Florida area that could have been playing for the Miami Hurricanes, but they opted to go elsewhere because they didn't believe that they were going to receive the proper development. It's hard to get recruits to come play for you when you're not having the on-the-field results that you need to give recruits confidence that, hey, staying in state is the right decision for me. They rather go play for OSU and Alabama or Georgia where they know they're going to have a great chance at being able to get developed and prepare for the next level. When's the last time FSU and Florida have put first-round picks in the NFL? It wasn't until this past year, and the first-round picks that they put into the league weren't even guys that they recruited. They were guys out of the transfer portal. Jared Verse was a transfer portal guy. You know, Ricky Pearsall was a transfer portal guy. It's been a while since Florida recruited somebody out of high school that was a first-round pick not named Anthony Richardson. That's really the only one you can think of. That's about it. So until these programs start competing for the SEC again, which is Florida, and FSU is able to sustain the level of success that they had last year, and they go back to being a consistent 10, 11-win program, you're going to continue to see these teams struggle to keep some of the best in-state talent inside of this state, getting them to commit to their universities with how inconsistent they've been over these last couple of years. And the same thing goes for Miami. But Miami isn't struggling right now like those schools are. Miami has actually out-recruited both Florida and Florida State. Mario Cristobal, as much flack as what people give him for being a head coach, he's a damn good recruiter. So until FSU and Florida can start giving recruits a reason to believe and come into their program, they're going to continue to allow these players to leave the state. You got to incentivize these players to want to stay home. And FSU and Florida aren't giving them a lot of reasons to do so.